Rock climbing is thrilling, but it's also one of the deadliest sports out there. Every year, over 30 rock climbers lose their lives in the US, and what's truly chilling is how these tragedies happen. Most deaths don't come from daring ascents or extreme challenges. They happen during the ordinary moments, rappelling, misjudging distances, or a small mistake with gear. One slip, one loose knot, and a climber can fall hundreds of feet. For every 1,000 hours spent rock climbing, injuries and accidents occur at a rate that makes it one of the riskiest outdoor activities. The danger is part of the draw, but when things go wrong, the consequences can be devastating. These are the 5 worst deaths in rock climbing, stories that reveal just how unforgiving the sport can be. Luce Douady was only 16 years old when her life was tragically cut short on June 14, 2020. Born on November 17, 2003, in the small French village of Luce Douady, she grew up surrounded by the mountains of Isère, a region known for its breathtaking cliffs and climbing routes. By age 7, she had already developed a love for climbing, a passion that would shape her life. Luce was a rising star. At just 15, she won a gold medal at a senior European Cup competition and became a junior world champion. People in the climbing world saw her as a natural talent, someone who could climb with a mix of grace and strength. She was even seen as a potential Olympic competitor for Paris 2024. But it wasn't just about competitions. Luce loved climbing in nature, tackling steep cliffs, and exploring challenging routes with friends. That summer day in June, she joined a group of friends for an outing to Saint Pancras, a popular climbing spot in the Grèce-Vaudin Valley. The area is known for its stunning views and sheer rock faces, but it can also be dangerous. To get to the climbing site, the group had to cross a narrow, exposed path carved into the mountainside. The path had a handrail for safety, but it hugged the edge of the Louise Cliff, which drops nearly 500 feet straight down. As Luce and her friends carefully made their way along the path, something went wrong. Investigators later found that Luce hadn't secured her safety cable to the handrail. For a moment, she lost her footing on the uneven rocky trail. Then, she slipped. In an instant, she was gone. She fell nearly 500 feet, plummeting to the rocks below. The horror of that moment is unimaginable. Her friends could only watch, helpless and in shock, as one of the brightest talents in climbing disappeared before their eyes. The news of Luce Douady's death shook the climbing community and beyond. At just 16, she had already achieved so much, including winning a junior world championship and competing at senior levels, with her future brimming with potential. Her death raised many questions, and investigators concluded that a momentary lapse during a familiar but dangerous approach path likely led to the fatal fall. Her club, Chambéry Escalade, paid tribute to her, calling her a beautiful person full of energy, passions, and talent. Luce's life and achievements inspired countless climbers, but it was her joyful spirit that truly stood out. Brad Gobright's story is another painful reminder of how quickly climbing can turn dangerous. Brad was a 31-year-old climber from Orange County, California, who had spent most of his life chasing some of the toughest climbs in the world. He started climbing when he was just 6 years old, and as an adult, he became one of the most well-known free solo climbers, scaling cliffs without any ropes or safety gear. But Brad wasn't just about solo climbs. He also excelled in big wall climbing, setting records and achieving first ascents on some of the hardest routes. On November 27, 2019, Brad and his climbing partner, 26-year-old Aiden Jacobson, had just finished an impressive climb in El Potrero Chico, a famous climbing spot in northern Mexico. They had tackled the El Sendero Luminoso, a challenging and beautiful route that attracts climbers worldwide. After hours of effort, they stood at the top, having conquered the rock face. But the danger wasn't over. Climbing doesn't end when you reach the summit. You still have to make it back down. For Brad and Aiden, this meant rappelling, a method where climbers use ropes to lower themselves down the cliff. They decided to use a technique called simul-rappelling. In this method, both climbers descend simultaneously, using opposite sides of a single rope as a counterweight. It's a faster way to rappel, but it's also risky. As they began their descent, everything seemed fine. Brad was on one side of the rope, Aiden on the other. But then, something went wrong. Aiden later described feeling a sudden pop in the rope. In an instant, they both started falling. Aiden crashed into some bushes and landed on a ledge, which broke his fall. He survived with injuries, but Brad wasn't so lucky. He fell about 1,000 feet to the bottom of the cliff. The impact was fatal. Witnesses described the horrifying sight of Brad's fall, his bright blue shirt disappearing as he tumbled over the edge. Everyone was stunned. Brad was one of the best. He had set records on El Capitan in Yosemite, climbed routes most people wouldn't dare attempt, and brought an infectious joy to everything he did. His death felt unreal, especially because it didn't happen during a daring solo climb or a risky first ascent. It happened during the descent, a routine part of the day for experienced climbers. Investigators believe the accident may have been caused by an error in how the rope was tied. In simul-rappelling, if one side of the rope isn't secured properly or slips through the anchor, both climbers can fall. It's a small mistake, but in climbing, small mistakes can have devastating consequences. For Brad, climbing was more than a sport. It was his life. He once said that he worked odd jobs just to fund his climbs, spending as much time as possible on the rock. Tributes poured in from all over the world. Fellow climbers like Alex Honnold and Jimmy Chin called him a true light and a climber's climber. Friends remembered his humor, his passion, and his incredible talent. Brad Gobright pushed the limits of what humans can do on rock, but his life ended in a moment of unimaginable terror. Just as heartbreaking was the story of another Brad, a climber whose life ended in Yosemite National Park on August 16, 2014, only hours after experiencing one of his happiest moments. Brad Parker was an adventurer in every sense. At 36 years old, he had spent much of his life chasing thrills and exploring the outdoors. He was a skilled rock climber, a yoga instructor, a surfer, and a mountain biker. His energy and enthusiasm inspired those around him. He was the kind of person who made everyone feel like life was an adventure waiting to be seized. On that Saturday, Brad was with his girlfriend, Janie Dial, in Yosemite National Park. Together, they climbed Cathedral Peak, a stunning granite spire towering above the landscape. Reaching the summit was exhilarating, but Brad had more planned. With the breathtaking view as their backdrop, he proposed to Janie. She said yes. The moment was pure joy, and Brad called it the happiest day of his life. But Brad's adventurous spirit wasn't satisfied just yet. After the proposal, he decided to tackle another climb, the Mathis Crest Traverse. This dramatic ridge is a mile-long stretch of sharp granite with steep drops on both sides. Climbers love it for its exposure and challenge. The ridge is narrow in many spots, sometimes as slim as a sidewalk, and other sections taper to just a knife's edge. At around 5:45 p.m., Brad reached the northern section of Mathis Crest. This area is known to be more difficult than the rest of the ridge. The rock becomes looser, and the terrain is uneven. Brad chose to climb without ropes or safety equipment, a style known as free soloing. For someone with his experience, this wasn't unusual. He had climbed many of Yosemite's big walls, including Half Dome, and his skill was undeniable. But even the best climbers can't always control the risks. Earlier in the day, Brad had pushed himself hard. After summiting Cathedral Peak, he ran 3 miles to Mathis Crest. Witnesses who saw him before the climb said he looked tired. He mentioned feeling dehydrated and said his muscles were cramping. These are dangerous conditions for any climber, let alone someone attempting a free solo ascent. As he climbed, Brad passed other climbers on the ridge. They later described the moment as surreal. Brad seemed determined, but his fatigue was apparent. Some wondered if he should have stopped, but they didn't think he was in immediate danger. Then, it happened. While climbing the northern section of the ridge, Brad lost his footing. One climber described seeing him slip and fall. The narrow ridge offered no room for recovery. Brad plummeted nearly 300 feet down the steep granite face. Witnesses were horrified. They watched helplessly as he disappeared from view, tumbling down the jagged cliff. The sound of his fall echoed through the valley. It was a terrifying moment, one that no climber wants to witness. Rescue teams arrived quickly, but the terrain was challenging. By the time they reached Brad, it was too late. His injuries were fatal. Because it was getting dark and the area was so remote, the rescuers had to stay with his body overnight. It wasn't until the next morning that a helicopter could recover him. Brad Parker's death left his loved ones and the climbing community in shock. Known for his strength, positivity, and adventurous spirit, he seemed invincible. For his fiancée, Janie Dial, the loss was especially devastating. Their day, which began with love and celebration on Cathedral Peak, ended in tragedy, leaving a void too deep to fathom. A year later, Janie reflected on their time together. describing it as a wild love journey full of depth and passion. She spoke of the relentless layers of grief and the unshakable bond she still feels with Brad. Despite the overwhelming pain, she expressed gratitude for the love they shared, carrying his spirit with her in everything she does. For 12-year-old Tito Traversa, tragedy came from a place no one expected: equipment failure caused by human error. On July 5, 2013, Tito's life ended in a devastating fall during what should have been a routine climbing trip in Orpierre, France. His death shook the climbing world, not just because of his young age, but because of the circumstances surrounding the accident. Tito was a prodigy born on April 22, 2001, in Italy. By the time he was 10, he had already climbed his first 514A route, a level of difficulty most adult climbers can only dream of. By 12, he had completed 4 climbs of that grade. He was passionate, dedicated, and immensely talented. People in the climbing community often spoke of his future, imagining the heights he could reach. On that July day, Tito was with a group from his climbing gym in Ivrea, Italy. The trip was supposed to be a chance for the young climbers to practice outdoors, away from the walls of a gym. The group included 10 youth climbers, 2 parents, and an instructor. It seemed like the perfect way to spend a summer day. But there was a problem no one noticed. Someone, likely one of the parents who wasn't a climber, had assembled several quick draws incorrectly. Quick draws are essential pieces of climbing gear. They connect a climber's rope to bolts drilled into the rock, creating a safety system. Each quick draw has 2 carabiners connected by a strong sewn sling. However, the carabiners in Tito's quick draws weren't attached to the sling. Instead, they were held in place by small rubber keepers designed only to prevent the carabiners from spinning. Tito began his climb warming up on a 510 route. This grade is relatively easy for a climber of his ability, something he could complete without difficulty. But as he reached the top and weighted the rope, the quick draws failed. The carabiners, supported only by the fragile rubber keepers, couldn't hold the weight. One by one, the draws gave way. 8 of the 10 quick draws on his harness were incorrectly assembled. As they failed, Tito fell. He dropped 50 feet to the ground. The impact was catastrophic. Witnesses described the scene as shocking and surreal. What should have been a safe climb for someone as skilled as Tito turned into a nightmare. His young friends and the adults on the trip were helpless as they watched the accident unfold. Rescue teams rushed Tito to a hospital in Grenoble, France. For 3 days, doctors fought to save him, but his injuries were too severe. On July 8, 2013, Tito passed away. The tragedy sparked an investigation that revealed just how preventable the accident was. French officials found that 8 of Tito's quick draws were improperly assembled. The carabiners should have been clipped through the full-strength sling, but instead, they were only connected to the rubber keeper. This mistake turned essential safety equipment into a deadly hazard. The climbing community was stunned. Many climbers admitted they never checked their quick draws because they assumed such a mistake couldn't happen. But it did, and Tito bore the consequences. The fallout from the accident led to legal action. 5 people were charged with manslaughter, including the climbing instructor, the gym owner, and the manufacturer of the rubber keepers. In 2018, a court in Turin sentenced the instructor to 2 years in prison for failing to check the equipment. Others were acquitted. The climbing community mourned deeply. Legendary climber Chris Sharma shared his heartbreak, saying, "The climbing community has lost a great person and amazing climber, sending my love and prayers to his family." It wasn't Tito's skill or experience that failed him, it was the oversight of others. A reminder that in climbing, attention to detail can mean the difference between life and death. But for Stuart Philip Porter, the danger came during one of the most routine moments in climbing, the descent. Stuart was a 21-year-old climber from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, known for his love of the outdoors and adventurous spirit. On September 22, 2024, he set out to climb Devil's Tower in Wyoming, one of the most iconic climbing destinations in the United States. Rising nearly 1,300 feet above the surrounding landscape, Devil's Tower is a stunning formation that attracts climbers from around the world. With its sheer walls and challenging routes, it's a dream destination for those who love the thrill of scaling rock faces. That Sunday, Stuart and his climbing partner tackled El Craco Diablo, a popular 2-pitch trad route rated 5.8. It's a route that offers both beauty and challenge, with steep cracks and breathtaking views. Climbers often choose it for its balance of difficulty and accessibility. Stewart had already climbed the route earlier in the day and rappelled down without incident. But as the day wore on and shadows grew longer, he and his partner decided to rappel the second pitch one last time before calling it a day. Rappelling, though a standard part of climbing, can be deceivingly dangerous. It requires absolute precision and focus. Unlike climbing up, where you have points of contact and anchors, rappelling leaves you suspended on a rope, completely reliant on its setup and your technique. As Stewart began his descent, something went tragically wrong. Witnesses believe he rappelled off the end of his rope. His rope was an irregular length, 66 meters instead of the standard 60 or 70 meters, and he likely miscalculated the distance he needed to descend. Without enough rope to safely reach the next anchor or the ground, Stewart fell. The drop from the second pitch of El Craco Diablo is devastating. Stewart fell nearly 200 feet, sustaining severe impact injuries. His partner, stranded on the wall as night fell, could only wait helplessly. Rescuers, including guides from Devil's Tower Lodge and Buck Wild climbing guides, spent hours climbing to reach Stewart's partner. By the time they reached him and brought him down, the weight of what had happened was clear. Stewart had succumbed to his injuries, and the day had ended in tragedy. Devil's Tower, despite its challenges, is considered relatively safe, with only 7 recorded climbing deaths in its 118-year history. Stewart's accident reminded everyone of the inherent risks, even on routes that climbers consider routine. The National Park Service later confirmed that there was no equipment malfunction involved in the accident. Stewart's fall was likely the result of a misjudgment, something that can happen to even the most careful climbers. Small errors, like not tying a stopper knot at the end of the rope or failing to double-check its length, can have catastrophic consequences. Devil's Tower stands as a testament to the beauty and danger of climbing. Stewart's death is a tragic addition to its history, a reminder that no matter how skilled or experienced a climber may be, the risks are always there.